There's a fire inside you can't ignore. Stand still? Not a chance. You're a lifelong learner who's come this far. Now, we're here to help you keep going further. Capella University. What can't you do? Visit capella.edu to learn more.
Hey listeners, this is Peter and welcome back to the History Shorts. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the world. Download Podcast Republic today, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts. In the year 800 AD, on Christmas Day, inside the Grand Basilica of St. Peter's in Rome, a man knelt in prayer. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in the simple robes of a pilgrim. But when he rose, Pope Leo III placed upon his head a golden crown and then proclaimed him Charles Augustus, Emperor of the Romans. That man was Charlemagne, King of the Franks, and in that moment, he became the most powerful ruler in Europe since the fall of Rome. To some, he was a conqueror, to others, a saintly monarch. But to history, he was the man who saved Western civilization from collapsing into chaos. We'll finish today's episode with a history brief, which introduces another character from Felton and Fowler's Famous Americans You Didn't Know Existed. A quick word from our sponsors.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
This day in history. On February 17, 1801, Thomas Jefferson was elected President of the United States after a bitter tie in the Electoral College, which was finally broken in the House of Representatives. The peaceful transfer of power between political rivals became a defining moment of American democracy. On February 17, 1933, Newsweek magazine published its first issue, adding a new voice to American journalism that would shape political reporting for decades. Story of the day. To understand Charlemagne's rise, you kind of have to imagine the world that he inherited. You see, 3 centuries earlier, the Western Roman Empire had fallen. Its roads crumbled, trade routes disappeared, and literacy all but vanished. Europe was a patchwork of warring tribes, Franks, Saxons, Lombards, Visigoths, each clinging to survival amid the ruins of Rome. The very idea of civilization, as the Romans had known it, seemed gone forever. Hence, the Dark Ages. But in the lands of Gaul, what is now modern France, a Germanic tribe known as the Franks had begun to carve out stability under a dynasty called the Carolingians. By the time Charles, the grandson of Charles Martel, the hero who had stopped the Muslim advance into Europe at Tours in 732, came to power, the Franks were poised to dominate the continent. Charlemagne's challenge was enormous: to unify a fractured Europe, defend Christianity, and to restore order to a continent that had forgotten what order ever meant. Charlemagne, or Charles the Great, was born around 742 AD. When his father, Pepin the Short, died in 768, the Frankish kingdom was divided between Charles and his brother Carloman. 2 years later, Carloman mysteriously died, leaving Charles the sole ruler of all the Franks. He wasted no time asserting his authority. Charlemagne's armies swept across Europe. He conquered the Lombards in Italy, subdued the Avars in Central Europe, and launched brutal campaigns against the pagan Saxons, forcing them to convert to Christianity. He ruled through military might, yes, but also through some law, religion, and diplomacy, and that's where this story really takes root. He expanded his empire to include most of modern France, Germany, and the Low Countries of Austria, Switzerland, and parts of Italy and Spain, earning him the first title, the Father of Europe. But conquest was only the beginning of what made Charlemagne so remarkable, because his real genius was not what he destroyed, but really what he rebuilt. Charlemagne's relationship with the Catholic Church was both political and personal. He saw himself as a soldier of God, a king chosen to defend and spread Christianity across Europe. The Church, in turn, saw in Charlemagne the strong arm it needed to survive in a dangerous world. Rome itself had been threatened by rival nobles, and Pope Leo III, accused by enemies of corruption, fled north seeking protection. Charlemagne welcomed him, restored him to power, and then in gratitude, Leo crowned him emperor on Christmas Day in 800. To contemporaries, the coronation was more than symbolic, though. It meant that the authority of the old Roman Empire, long fallen, was reborn in the Christian West. Charlemagne now stood as the heir to both Rome and Christendom, blending ancient imperial ambition with medieval faith. It was the birth of what historians later called the Holy Roman Empire, a union of crown and cross that would define European politics for 1,000 years. But Charlemagne's most enduring achievement did not come from the battlefield or the throne. It came from the classroom. By the late 700s, literacy in Western Europe had collapsed. Even priests could barely read the Latin that they recited in Mass. Books were rare, knowledge was dying. Charlemagne saw that an ignorant clergy and an uneducated nobility threatened not only religion but civilization itself. So he launched what became known as the Carolingian Renaissance, a cultural revival that rescued Europe from the dark abyss of illiteracy. He invited scholars from across the continent to his court at Aachen in present-day Germany. Among them was Alcuin of York, an English monk who became Charlemagne's chief advisor on education. Together, they established schools and monasteries and cathedrals throughout the empire. They standardized handwriting, creating Carolingian minuscule, the clear, legible script that became the ancestor to our modern lowercase letters. They also copied and preserved ancient texts, saving much of the Greek and Roman philosophy, science, and literature from being lost forever. They reformed the clergy, improved liturgy, and insisted that priests and monks be able to read the Bible accurately. And they encouraged literacy among nobles and commoners alike, not for prestige but for governance, faith, and unity. In short, Charlemagne brought learning back to Europe. It's no exaggeration to say that if not for him and his circle of scholars, much of the classical civilization, Plato, Virgil, Aristotle, might never have survived the Middle Ages. Contemporary accounts describe Charlemagne as tireless. He rose before dawn, attended Mass daily, held court, dictated laws, and revived reports from across his vast empire. He was deeply curious, asking questions about astronomy, law, and theology. Yet he also remained a man of his time, deeply pious, sometimes ruthless, and unbending in his authority. He outlawed pagan rituals, punished rebellion harshly, and expected loyalty above all else. But his discipline extended to himself as well. He ate simply, wore plain clothes, and often slept in military camps. Even as emperor, he was in many ways a contradiction. A warlord who valued learning, a conqueror who preserved peace, a barbarian crowned in Rome. But that complexity is exactly what made him the first truly European ruler. When Charlemagne died in 814 at the age of 72, his empire stretched across most of Western and Central Europe. He was buried in his palace chapel, a magnificent octagon structure that still stands today, one of Europe's oldest surviving cathedrals. But like all great empires, his would also not last. Within a generation, it fractured under the rule of his grandsons, divided into what would later become France, Germany, and Italy. And yet, even in this unity, his influence endured. Charlemagne's reign laid the groundwork for medieval Europe. The very idea of unified Christendom, the revival of classical learning, and the model of kingship bound to moral and religious duty. Centuries later, emperors, popes, and even dictators would invoke his name, from the Holy Roman Emperors to Napoleon Bonaparte, who saw himself as Charlemagne's heir. Modern Europe still bears his imprint in law, education, and even language. He became, quite literally, the father of the West. The History Brief. The following comes to us from Felton and Fowler's Famous Americans You Didn't Know Existed. John Albert, a New York-based chemist with a passion for plants, Albert contrived a system for heating buildings with elephant dung laced with whole wheat flour. Zebra dung is effective too, in case your elephants aren't producing, although pachyderm poop is indeed the fuel of choice, and it really works. Albert's first and most prestigious client was his employer, the New York Botanical Gardens, which began heating one of its hothouses using weekly shipments, of high-grade manure from the nearby Bronx Zoo. The manure, representing the best efforts of the zoo's 5 resident elephants, would arrive packed in a crate labeled Special Handling. Running around 165 degrees Fahrenheit on delivery, the stuff would then be stored in a vat, its vapors sucked by a fan through heating pipes into the hothouse. After cooling off, it could be used as a fertilizer. Albert's dream for the future included racetrack grandstands heated with horse manure, and chicken coops kept toasty warm with chicken poo. Meanwhile, budgetary restrictions at the zoo forced Albert from the role, and he went to work at an estate owned by the Rockefellers in upstate New York. His dream never quite realized. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today and helping make this little show such a mighty success. If you are enjoying this show and would like to help me with its production, you can always donate a few dollars and buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com or become a Patreon member to enjoy these episodes ad-free. You could find both links on our website at www.historyshortspodcast.com. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you all again tomorrow.
Ready to buy a car, a home, or just want to take control of your money? Your FICO score matters, and 90% of top lenders use it to make decisions. Check your FICO score for free today without hurting your credit score. Visit myfico.com/free or download the MyFICO app today. MyFICO gives you the score lenders use most, plus credit reports and real-time alerts to help keep you on top of your credit. Visit myfico.com/free and take the mystery out of your FICO score.